I am interviewing Dr. Betty Murray today. And Dr. Betty and I go back. We go back about 3 years. And I firmly believe we were brought together by our personalities, these dynamic personalities, very authentic. You see what you get with Dr. Betty. And you know what? I love it. I love everything about her because of it. And I am going to be diving into her story today. She has had multiple careers, multiple derailings, and she has become who she is today because of these. So I want to dive into how our life can change over the course of our life. And what we lay out for ourselves isn't always where we end up, and that is okay. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Betty. She is a researcher, nutritionist, and functional medicine provider with a 2-decade career as a trailblazer in women's health. She's a fierce advocate for personalized healthcare, as am I. And as the founder and CEO of Living Well Dallas Functional Medicine Center and CEO and founder of Menra, a virtual health clinic and women's health intelligence company that's revolutionizing menopause care nationwide using the tools of functional medicine. This woman is a powerhouse. She is determined to help women navigate the unique health challenges faced by women. Betty launched the Menopause Mastery podcast in 2022, and she is the new host of Powering Women Through Menopause on the CW in select markets. She has frequently been a featured guest expert on NBC, Fox News Broadcasting, and the CW. She has also shared the stage as a riveting speaker with, oh my gosh, Lisa Nichols, Dr. Mark Hyman, JJ Virgin, Dr. Stephen Gundry. Oh my gosh, the names go on and on. You have to meet this woman. You really do. And I cannot wait to dive into her. So here we go. Let's bring on Dr. Betty. Dr. Betty Murray, welcome to my house, to my home. All these years that we've known each other, I've always been a guest on what you do. And I am so excited to invite you to my new show and have you one of the beginning guests because, audience, you're in for a treat. This woman is dynamic. She is fun. We are kindred spirits. And I think our energy will be explosive. We're going to have to hold ourselves back. Let's not hold ourselves back. Let's just not. Let's just be us. But I want to dive into your story, Dr. Betty. I've already told the audience a little bit about who you are, but I know just from knowing you that this didn't just happen. You didn't just wake up one day and have this amazing practice and be the leader in menopause and all of these wonderful things that are growing with you and happening with you. You started in a totally different place and very similar to me. I've been through multiple different careers throughout my life that have led me to where I am. So if you wouldn't mind giving just a brief overview of where you started and where you are, and then I want to dive into the hard parts, if I'm honest. I want to dive into your ability to trust and grow with the changes. But let's start off with just a little synopsis, because you started in a totally different area and went into technology and all sorts of stuff. So give me the lowdown.
Oh my God, yeah. My background's pretty varied and pretty wild. First and foremost, yes, I've had 3 different distinct careers with 3 different significant career paths. So the first part of it is I went off to college. I wanted to be a doctor at that point, but I had to work my way through college. So I was working full time and going to school full time. I enjoyed business too. So I recognize now that there was this entrepreneurial spirit kind of behind me. I was definitely one of those people like, I think we could do that better all the time. Which isn't really well thought of in corporate America, honestly, unless you're at the top. And so I was taking business classes and, AP science, and I got really down to the answer that at the time, because of how I viewed money and opportunity, I was like, I don't know if I could do 12 years of school, right? And work. How am I going to do this? And my goal was to not go home. I was going to live on my own, right? And so I was like, I'll just do this business thing, right? So I get out and go into sales and marketing, get a business degree. I'm out working across the United States. I start working for, at the time, Lady Foot Locker, right? So way back in the late 80s, right? So this is dating me. Late 80s, I go to work for them. I actually you'll appreciate this. I go to a meeting, a big corporate meeting, and I show up in a pantsuit. I got pulled aside by a VP and asked why I was not wearing pantyhose and a skirt at Lady Foot Locker. And I was like, he was a man, and he was a man. And I was like, well, you seem to be wearing a pantsuit and it just looks fine. And I was like, it was the first time I had ever seen patriarchy in an all women's company. Literally, I was like, okay, I'm probably not going to last here long. I lasted about 4 years.
I mean, that's a lot of patience right there.
Well, part of it was, I grew up in an environment where you just grind it out. You get a job with a corporation, you grind it out. So I made it all the way to Chicago. I worked for another company at that point, and I didn't want to stay in the sales and marketing retail world. I was like, I don't find joy in this. And I was in a starter marriage, which is a whole nother story. And I was trying to leave that marriage, and I thought I would leave him in Chicago, but he followed me to Dallas. So it took another, 6 months to a year to actually divorce. And I was regrouping while in Texas, and I was actually looking at the PA program here at UT Southwestern. And again, I'm looking at it now, at that point I've rebought a house, and I was just like, how am I going to do that and afford everything? And I took the debt from the marriage. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to deal with stuff and I'll kind of regroup and figure it out. Well, this is the early 90s when tech is booming. So we're still in the dial-up age. So anybody that's listening and watching this, this is the dial-up days. Right. My dad was an engineer. Anything scientific or technical, I'm usually pretty good at. I mean, to my husband's dismay, So I was working for a company and I started asking a lot of questions. And I was like, gosh, I really kind of understand what's going on here. I understand the business intimately because I've managed companies and stores. And so I went and took some certifications. I was like, I can do this. This is on the side. I can figure this out. Because the tech world, if you go to college for the tech world, you're behind. Because the college world is too slow, right? So if you could stay up on and you can learn at an accelerated rate, it was great. So I'm like, cool, I'll do that. So I do that. I get swept in technology boom. I'm the first female hired into the company working for a CTO because I understood the business and I understood what they were trying to do at the time, what they were putting in. I ended up getting certified in a multitude of crap that I don't use anymore. But I was in tech for 11 years and worked 100 hours a week, paid less than half of what the men that worked in the building did, but had more responsibility than them. Literally, the side that I was responsible for was whether the stores made money. So if something didn't work on my side, literally no money came in. And I got diagnosed with colitis when I was there. And I had already had digestive stuff that would come and go. But when I asked what I thought was a legitimate question about my diet, the doctor laughed in my face and said, it has nothing to do with what you eat. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't really work for me. And so I just started taking nutrition classes. I had already been doing yoga. I was already working on my stress and meditation, all this other stuff. And that's when it clicked. I was like, this is what I'm really supposed to be doing. This is why I didn't go to med school way back when. So I go back, get a master's, a CN, hang up my shingle, and, then I start my private practice, over 20 years ago now. And I've been doing that ever since. So I've had this very distinct different career background, which has helped me as a businesswoman. Of
course.
But circuitous. So I've spent more money and more time than if I had gone to med school to begin with.
It always works out that way, right? But as you're telling your story, and I'm like, oh my gosh, so we're going through all these different things. And it just reminded me, maybe from personal experience or from speaking from other amazing women such as yourself, but how lonely powering through can be. Because you're pushing through and trying to make things happen and adapting. And that's the beauty of our adrenal system or of our stress response. But at the same time, it's alienating. And often a lot of people stop because they feel alone. They don't feel heard. They don't feel supported. And they're either powering through to where their health takes them down and gives them a big sign, such as yours, and then they let that take them down, or maybe it turns them around. But I can imagine that through this whole thing, there must have been a lot of periods in your life where you felt very lonely and very alone and not really sure if what you were even doing was going to amount to anything. How did you get through that?
I'd like to say that I'm kind of wired to take on adversity. You'd like to think of yourself positively that way. I would say some of it is I have a very strong sense of purpose. And I feel like I don't necessarily need to know everything about that purpose. But when I get that inner knowing, it just tells me go. And I've always been like that. When the first time I moved across the country, I got a phone call on a Tuesday. Sorry, I was a college student just finishing the semester. And so I, had been out with my friends and they woke me up early in the morning and asked me to move to Paducah, Kentucky. And I'm like, where? I had to look it up. I had to look it up on an atlas. This is back in the day, no internet. And I was like, I don't even know where that is. But I had to be there by Friday. So I packed some crap in my car and left, because it was like, this is what you do. And so I think it's one of those things. It's like, I don't need to know all the answers. I don't need to know whether it's going to work out. I'm just going to move forward, period. Right. And so you just do it anyway. And I think that adversity sometimes makes you stronger. Like, I had a mom that was pretty harsh. Right. She grew up with the mindset of, we don't want anybody to get a big head, so we're going to take you down a few notches. And I think some of that was that too, because I was just like, well, I don't have to listen to you. I don't have to believe what you got to believe. But I think all of those things added up to taking the leap, even when you don't have any idea if there's any sort of thing strapped to your back.
Yeah, I mean, I see this all the time. People make decisions out of fear. They're afraid to move forward, so they don't move forward. But then a year later, they're in the same place or moving backwards. And it does take a very strong level of trust. Some people do that with religion. Some people do that with just trusting the universe. Some people just have that chutzpah within them. I do too, in many ways. When I graduated high school, everyone's like, oh, you're going to go stay here. I was like, no, I'm gone. Bye. And I just moved. Like, there was no, no, I'm not staying around. Like, I'll see you later. Like, take care. But not everyone, I don't know if it's not that they don't have it, but maybe past patterns have trained them not to recognize it or trust it. So it's very good advice to just trust the gut, because every successful person I talk to doesn't really know how they get to where they are until they look back at it and they're like, oh, well, that's how that happened. But in the moment, you have no idea. And that's a very powerful thing to trust in a world where we're constantly living by other people's expectations, right? And we're looking at what other people are doing. We're comparing ourselves to others, and we're being told this is the way to go, and this is the way to think, and this is the way that everything has to go. And we're losing a lot of the trust in ourselves to stand up and say, no, I want to disrupt a little, or I want to just be me, or I want to just own who I am, and I want you to love me for who I am. And I don't really care whether you don't or not. And that's really hard. I find that really hard, both for men and women, to accept, is that really soul searching and going deep in themselves and being who they want to be and honing in on their beliefs. People are afraid to speak up anymore. Do you find that too? Yeah.
No, I do find that. I know, like, for me, like, if you wanted me to do something, you had to question whether I was going to be able. Like, I remember, so when I got into the IT world, I'd come home, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to do this. And I go talk to my parents. Now, I was the worst math student ever, right? I had some hangups about it from elementary school that kind of followed me. And I think, everybody has one of those, but I would say math, particularly for girls, tends to be that one. And, I remember telling my mother that I'm going to go into IT. I'm going to go take these classes. And she flat out looks me in the face and says, do they have an aptitude test for that? And I look at it. And so it was like, that to me was laying down the gauntlet, right? Like, that to me was, oh, you just laid down the gauntlet because I have to prove you wrong. So I think, some of it is that faith and understanding faith. And, we have so much more feedback today, right? You can get feedback from social media and your family and your peers and everybody else, and people you don't even know are giving you feedback. And so I think people take that in, and and it becomes a way to stay stuck. But, I think if you were to look at all of that when you get negative feedback and go, oh, you're laying down the gauntlet for me to prove you wrong, right? Because that was a guarantee. Anytime you told me I couldn't do something, I was like, oh, I'm going to have to do it now.
You were one of those kids.
I must prove you wrong.
You were like my youngest. That's just like, no, I'm not going to accept that. Like, no, you're.
Yeah, I don't accept no. No doesn't exist for me. No does
I don't
not
like
exist
no
for me.
either. I don't. I was never an acceptor of no. I was like, well, no, I'll figure out a way. Like, don't get in my way. But yeah, and I love that. I love that instigating factor. I love that about you. So was there a point in this journey, because obviously you're weaving around and you're trying different things and you're putting on different hats and you're meeting different people and you're learning different things. Was there a point where your purpose and your vision became so crystal clear? Do you remember a moment like that where you were like, okay, that's what all this has led to. Okay, here it is. Was it a moment you were in where you reflected back, or was it a moment where you actually projected it forward?
I would say I've had moments where I would say there was clarity, and then the crystal clarity was looking forward. It was a future self experience. And it
Yeah.
really is where I am right now. I mean, I've been in healthcare for 20 years. We've been helping people, tens of thousands of people throughout the 20 years. But it really was when I went back, I went back to get a PhD at like 48, 49. I was just turning 49. And everybody's like, why would you do that at $1,600 or whatever it was in credit hour? I'm like, because it's just money. But I felt compelled, and a lot of it was my own health and then looking into like women's health research. But there was this other kind of knowing that was driving it, that I'm going to do this and I'm going to finish it. And it was the future self, I believe, speaking to me, pulling me into my existence right now, because the hill I'm going to die on right now is why I'm here, right? It's women's health, it's women's autonomy. It is providing what is missing because we are overlooked in a patriarchal society. And that was a future self more than
Yeah.
anything else.
I think a lot about that. And I'd been doing daily meditations on future self and talking to myself in the future. And it is interesting. What legacy are you going to leave? I think about that all the time. If I was to leave the earth tomorrow, what would I want people to say? Or what would I want them to remember about me? It wouldn't be little things that we worry about every day. It wouldn't be whether my dishes were done or like my house was clean or I'd love to know that people think my kids are awesome and that they really just remember enjoying time with me. They were like, wow, she was a cool chick. I had a lot of fun with her. I'm going to miss her, right? I honestly think I've done my job in the life if people say, wow, man, I'm going to miss that energy around here, right? And I think we tend to attach success in our career and whatever to what that means. What am I going to be when I grow up? Am I going to be a doctor? Am I going to be a wife? Am I going to be this or that? And it's not about that. It's almost just about an energy that you want to live and you want to embody and a passion that you want to live by. And I find a lot of people, this takes a lot of heavy meditation and a lot of soul searching. So do you do a lot of meditation and future self and mantras and things? Or is this just something you just are naturally freaking fantastic at?
I'd love to say I was naturally fantastic at it. I do work on meditation and those kind of things. I would say I'm a struggling meditator. I work better like with visualization than just, I have a very, very busy sort of ADD sort of mind, but in a very focused sort of way at the same time. So,
Yeah.
Sitting and just letting something be is hard for me, but I can sit in visualization and focus attention on those things. And a lot of times it's not that I'm looking for a particular answer. It's just sitting in there and sort of visualizing what the next step would be or where I'm going to be in a while, and more so who I need to be, right? You have to be who you need to be that next thing, right? I think it's that. And I think so much of this comes as we get older, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a clarity and, there's this feeling. I mean, I remember when I was like 30, I'm like, cool, I'm 30. And then you start to turn 40 and you're like, oh my God, I'm getting old. And all this stuff. But I'm like, there's a beauty in your 50s. If you can embrace the fact that you have this massive amount of wisdom, there's actually a whole new world opening up at that point. And it really is, like, to me, it's a second teenage opportunity. Like, I don't look at it as a downhill slope at all. I'm like, I now have, it's like a new bright future. And I don't think a lot of people in our age group look at it that way. You're younger than I am. I think some of it is that perception, is what is your perception of where you are in time and space and who you can be? Not that you need to leave any particular legacy, classically, because I don't think anybody who has left a legacy came out planning that. Martin Luther King
Never.
was a reluctant political figure. Mahatma
Yeah.
Gandhi did not come out and say, hey, I'm going to starve, I'm going to hang out in jail forever. You know what I mean? All these people, didn't do that. They became that because of necessity and, future self.
That's a fantastic point about the age. Because when I was in my 30s, it was great and I was building things and whatnot. And I hit my 50s and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm behind. Why aren't I where I should be? I should be catching up. Wait a minute, what am I doing? And I'm approaching my 50s now, and I am so freaking excited to turn 50 because it's a whole nother level of growth and acceptance. And I'm seeing that already. I'll be 49 this year, and I'm already seeing such massive changes in me and changes in the way that I look in the world. And watching my friends, such as you and others who are in their 50s and their 60s, and that is where the things have shifted for them. What used to be considered old is now not. When I look at some of the people in their 30s, and I love you all out there, but just listen to this for a second. you're in your 30s, you're approaching 40s, and you're like, oh, I want the body I had when I was 25. Oh, I want the energy I had when I was 25. Oh, if only I would have done that when I was in my 20s. Oh, now I'm getting old. And I look at it as when I'm 60, I'm going to wish I had the body I had now. Right. Right. So I might as well enjoy the one I have and not be so hard on myself. And that was hard for me. Very, very, very hard for me. Aging, maybe not so much in my 30s, but as I was approaching into my 40s, I had a lot of like kind of come to Jesus moments from being a fashion model and looking at myself back then and knowing how little self-worth I had and how ugly I thought I looked in that moment, and looking back at the beauty and the purity that I had, and then looking in the mirror now and saying, oh, there's little crow's feet, and oh, my body isn't what it used to be. I had to really do a lot of work on that. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I don't think that's just a fashion model problem. I think it's a general problem with everyone as we start to get a little bit older and our bodies start to change, and finding that moment to embrace it and recognize that this whole entire path has brought us to one of the most, I think the 50s and 60s are probably the prime, the kick-ass moments of our life for us to embrace and enjoy, yet so many people fear it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is interesting because, I've got 20 years of listening to people in the room, and, you ask a woman what they want and they're always like, I want to, like, when did you feel your best? When I was 18. I'm like, oh my gosh, you weren't even at sexual maturation. Like, no, your body's not going to look like that. Or maybe is it worth what it might take to do that? Right? Because at the end of the day, you weren't probably very happy then either, because I can look back at the pictures of when I was 18 or 20, whatever, and I was pissed off about what's going on then. And I'm like,
my gosh.
What was I thinking?
And you had nothing. It was like no money, no job, no purpose. It was just,
yeah.
Oh my God, I never want to be 18 again.
Oh my God, I would go forward 10 years then to go back to 18. You know what I mean? Like, no. So, yeah, I think this, the decade that starts at 50 and then goes through it. I mean, there's so much that we know even from neuroscience, the remapping of the brain, the changes that our brains, particularly as women, go through. And I think if you can walk into this time period with open eyes as to, I have an opportunity here to create what is really a long-lasting experience that is what we worked so hard to get to, right? And that's what this opportunity really is. And it doesn't mean you have to go write the great book or create the greatest piece of art or create a company or anything else like that. Whatever it is for you, this is the time to do it. And it's the time to like lay down the gauntlet and stop the trying to appease other people or trying to be something that you're not right now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, I know what people are asking, so I'm going to ask it. They're going to say, wait, what do you mean the neuroscience of the brain in the 50s? I know what you're talking about, but share that because it is so fascinating. Yeah. What happens to our brain as we age or as we hit this period in our lives?
Yeah, yeah. So we know from imaging, especially the work of Dr. Lisa Mosconi's group, when a woman goes through menopause, so as they enter into that season and their hormones are declining, the brain starts to remap itself. So it shrinks a little bit in size, right? That's why we see some acceleration of dementia risk and things like that after menopause. Because dementia, I hate to tell you people, but dementia is a midlife disease. That stuff shows up by the time you're in my age group, not 30 years later. The symptoms just show up 30 years later. But what we really see is a remapping of where your brain is spending its most time and energy. So the hippocampus gets a little bit remapped, the frontal lobe, which is your decision making, and the amygdala even gets a little remapped. We sort of start to pull away from that. And what it does is map to more creative centers. So it maps more into intuition. It's not that we lose the mental capacity for judgment and things like that. Actually, we get more honed in because we're reaching into that intuitive side of the brain at the same time. Mm-hmm. But that's why we start to have like memory issues. It's because the brain is literally redoing it. But at the same time, it gets done with that within 5 to 10 years of menopause. Now, if you do hormone replacement, that sort of slows the engine. it's not necessarily all a bad thing. It's more of why is the brain doing it? And what we find is that creative expression changes, intuition changes. And it's probably the why is there a wise old sage? It's because she went through this and now she's got the wisdom to be able to express and understand things because she's understanding things at multiple levels and definitely an energetic level. So I think it's really cool because I think, I mean, I take hormone replacement, so I'm not having a shrinking brain, but I do think there's still creative things that are going on that are maybe somewhat stunted if I had not done hormones, maybe, but it is true. That's what's happening. We're meant to go through some of that remapping.
What do you do as a creative outlet?
It's funny. I have like this sort of, there's two things. I like to sing. I don't necessarily sing in public, but I like to
I was going to say, sing something, Betty. Let's hear it.
I don't necessarily, I mean, I did theater as a kid, right?
Although I have heard you sing.
Yeah, you have heard me sing. You heard me sing Journey
or something. Yeah, I've heard it.
Journey. Yeah, we both have a love of dance and performance. So I do, that's a creative outlet. I think about painting, but I'm actually very sensitive to a lot of paints, like the fumes from paints. So that's one of those that I'm like, probably shouldn't do. But, a lot of my creative pursuits is things like stage, speaking on stages and sharing information because it allows me to be on stage and entertain, but also educate at the same time. So that's like my guilty pleasure is being able to do those things.
Me too. We're such kindred spirits in that.
Yeah.
I think waking up every single day of my life and being able to educate, but hold an audience and speak to them and teach them and allow to have that energetic exchange. If I can do that every day for the rest of my life, I'm thrilled. And if we can put a little music on somewhere in the middle where I can dance a little, just took it to a whole nother level. And I think that's awesome. And I think many people, especially women, forget about that creative. And you're right, as their brain is changing, we have to tap into that creativity. Dance did save my life. There is no question. If I wouldn't have gone back to dance, I would not be where I am. I needed that creative outlet. I needed something that brought me joy to bring me out of the low frequency of fear and blame and uncertainty, to bring me up to a place to be able to shine, and spread joy. And I often when I talk to my clients, I'm like, oh, what do you do for joy? And a lot of people can't answer that question. They don't have an answer. They're like, oh, I'm just doing my things right now. I'm just getting the kids here and doing this and working my job and this. And I'm like, well, there has to be something that taps into that side of the brain. And maybe hearing your perspective on that, about how our brain changes, might encourage some of them to start taking action on that sooner. Because the sooner you start to tap into that creativity, the more responsive, I believe, your brain will be as you go through menopause. And I always remember this lady that I saw earlier in my career, and she was in her 90s, and she would come to see me in her tennis skirt every single freaking time with her tennis racket in her hand. And she would come in and she was so sharp and just sharp and calm at the same time, like just content in every aspect of her life in her little tennis skirt, her legs looked like 90-year-old legs, and she was great with that, and I always think of her, how many people don't take action on the things they enjoy, and then when they hit 90, they can't play tennis.
Right.
It's not an option for them to do that. So I think we have a lot more power than I think we sometimes realize. We expect other people, even us as physicians, we expect physicians to get us better, or we expect a personal trainer to get us better or whatever. But it really 100%, as comes down right here to your heart and your desire to want to grow and feel uncomfortable for a little while.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the adage, heavily studied too, that we will fight to stay consistent with what we believe rather than make ourselves happy. Right. So what we believe about ourselves, some of it is, we look at it, we go, okay, but some of that is probably because we had unsafe environments for decades, tens of thousands of millions of years. We were somewhat unsafe, so we needed to identify potential harm and other things. But we'll often stay consistent to the belief pattern that we're not enough, that people don't like us, that we're not smart, that we're not, whatever the not is, that we'll stay consistent to that because it helps us understand our ego and identity, rather than saying, I just want to be happy. Like, 'cause what else is it all for? I happen to love what I do. I happen to love the actual work that I do. Because my husband is retired. I have other friends that are like considering retirement, and everybody's like, Why would you do that? I'm like, I enjoy this until the day I don't. And believe me, I'm the most frighteningly decisive person you will ever meet. When I'm done, you'll know, because it'll be like,
I'm
I'll
done.
cut it off. I'm done.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not. So, but I do look at that and I go, why would anybody choose to make themselves unhappy by staying consistent with a belief pattern? And it's because that's how we have identified ourselves. So then it becomes, if I don't know my identity, then now what? Who am I? Right. And
Yeah.
I think the beauty of having like literally put on different versions of myself from a career standpoint, 3 completely different careers. I learned just through that process that whatever identity I have today is completely changeable, just like my outfit.
Oh, completely. The way you look at the world, you know, can change in 30 seconds
Yeah.
with just one reframing thought, one snap of the rubber band on your wrist and a rethought, right? And a repattern. And that's completely free. All it does is take effort. You just have to do it, right? And finding the joy, finding the happy, and choosing to be happy even in hard times. And I think a lot of people get this confused because they think you're faking your way, right? I've had people say, well, I'm just supposed to pretend that I don't have any money, or that I'm going through a divorce. I'm just supposed to pretend through it. I'm supposed to just be happy. And that's not what it is. We have all hard times. There's a lesson, though, that maybe you haven't quite figured out why, and it seems like the world is coming down on you and you don't have what you want and you're in a lack state. But that lack state is preparing you for the abundance you're about to have if you lean into it, right? And I think we see this more and more and more, just as time goes on, more social media, more stimulation, more clickbait. I mean, even clickbait in medicine. I mean, it's everywhere, right? And I do think that people are starting to say, wait a minute, hold up. This is becoming too much now. We're starting to recognize there's just stuff everywhere, and we need to step back and we need to really figure out what we want in our lives and how we're going to make that happen. There is so much power. I do believe in the next few years, power is going to come back to us if it hasn't already. In you or I, it has. We've found our power. We're like, we're doing this. But I do hope that through conversations like this and learning how our body responds to that overstimulation and really honing in on who we are as authentic people, we'll see a change in the world in general, right? We'll see better health, better outlook, happier people, happier children, better future, right? I mean, I'm hopeful. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but that's what I feel.
Yeah.
I feel that energy shifting and I like it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so sometimes, let's say somebody's stuck in that, let's say I'm stuck in that situation. And a lot of times, it's kind of like going on a weight loss journey. And if you're a woman, you've probably been on many of these. And most of the time, we'll stick to our guns. We'll be like, okay, I'm going to do whatever this is, whatever dietary change, whatever lifestyle change. And then we succumb to the people around us, right? We succumb to, family that's like, oh, you can eat a little bit of that, even though it's something you didn't commit to, or your girlfriend that's like, let's go out and have, cake and wine and da, 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 da. And, I think some of it sometimes too is that we may need to embrace new people in our world, which is very scary. Right.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it's like, I have this group of people, like I don't have children, but I pretty much know from everybody I've ever talked to that has kids that basically once you have kids for the next 18 years of your life, your peer group are the parents of your kids and their friends. Right? Like it's not necessarily always people that you feel totally aligned with. It's proximity, right? Proximity is how we end up with our friends. Proximity, our friends are the people we work with because we're in proximity to them. But what's really interesting about this time period is often we're still working, but that proximity thing radically changes. Kids go off to school, you become an empty nester, all this stuff. And I think it's really cool because it allows us to go, okay, some friends are in our lives sometimes to be there for a period of time to either be a reflection or a support. But it's also this kind of opportunity to go, okay, I love all these people, but I need to expand who I spend time with, because all of the research 100% pretty much puts everything down to this is you are a reflection of the people you spend time with. Right?
I literally just listened this morning. I listen to Dr. Joe Dispenza every morning. And literally that's what he was talking about this morning, was about how these friend groups come and go based on the time in your life, right? And how Someone could have been a very close friend of yours, and all of a sudden you haven't heard from them, and it seems like you're drifting apart. And we get so upset about it, but their time is done.
Yeah.
It's like you're shifting somewhere else right now, and you're going to be meeting new people and exciting people that are going to take you to the next journey. And instead of being so sad about the loss, or even the loss of parents, the loss of family. I mean, that was a big struggle for me. Losing my family, that was my identity. And I've had to learn that loss actually propelled me to where I am now, to be with people that are taking me to the next journey. My parents took me to where they needed to take me, and their death taught me something that took me to another level. And when I went to that level, then I met other people who took me to another level, and so on. And that's helped me deal with the grief as well. And I know you understand that.
Yeah, no.
Wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
With your personal stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so true. And I think it's there's such an opportunity to just go, okay, I'm going to jump in all in, and I'm going to meet new people that reflect the person I want to be. Maybe not the person I happen to have evolved into because of the circumstances in which my life has been. Right. Because, everybody has some level of discomfort, right? We all have different traumas and dramas. Like, there's not a single human that hasn't had at least a little T, right? We all have it. Just to what degree do you have it? And it's, it's traumatic to lose a parent. It's traumatic to lose a sibling. It's traumatic to lose a job. It's traumatic to have friends that you grew up with, that you've known your entire life, and to walk away. Like, because I've been all over the place, and I have friends from all over, and it still shocks me when there's people that are like, their friends or the friend group they had when they were like in elementary school. I have some girlfriends like that, but I know people too that's literally the people they still spend time with. And I'm like, that's so interesting, because I am a different person, and I've had people weave in and out, and I think it's okay. But I think it's that trusting that it's all going to be okay. Like, what's the worst case scenario? Like, when I left Chicago, I mean, I was married, had debt, we were going to divorce. There's no question about it. I was coming back to Texas, not that I really wanted to, I was just going to regroup. And, I wanted to go do something else. But, there was a lot of circumstances under that time period where I could have easily said, no, I need to stay and do the exact same thing I'm doing because I have an extraordinary amount of debt and I'm at risk of all these things. But I was like, I mean, what at that point in my life, what's the worst case scenario? What, I declare bankruptcy? I don't know anything about bankruptcy, but like, what's the worst case of that? I don't know. I know feeling terrible and feeling stuck is something I will not tolerate. That is 100% me. I will not tolerate feeling stuck, period.
And if you don't take action, you're going to stay stuck.
Right.
Some sort of action, right?
Yeah.
So when you were talking about the remapping of the brain, I don't know if you have this, I'm just putting you on the spot, but do you have tips for people that help that remapping process through this period, or daily little tiny chunks of things that people can do that actually benefits during that time? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a huge proponent for women replacing their hormones, mostly so we can protect the brain structures. But I think during this time period, I think there's several things that we should do. I think number one is step into your femininity if you turned it off. I mean, I came from IT, man. I had a decade where I don't think I wore a skirt, because inevitably I would have to like go into the server room, crawl around on the floor, lift up a piece of the floor because some of the wiring was done, and I'd see some of the guys standing behind me, and I'm like, bunch of assholes, pardon me, and so I quit wearing that, and then I had to be a guy in order to play along, and I didn't realize until I got to my like late 40s that I had kind of turned that part off. And, the lack of polarity in my relationship, because I was pretty much showing up like that, not realizing it. So I think there's a harnessing and embracing the feminine, right? And then there's little creative things, like whether it's singing or whether it's drawing or whether it's something. I think it's starting to expand the horizon into that arena. Like how many women I've met that are now dancing. I have a friend that started pole dancing. I'm not going to do that. My inner thighs are not happy about that kind of exercise. I tried it once and I was like, that hurts so bad. I'm like, if I end up with bruises on my thighs, it's not from that. That's all I'm saying. But you know what I mean? So like, there's all these things. Like, I think there's an importance to kind of that, again, that stuff that sort of pops up. Like, what did you enjoy when you were little? And do you still have that? I think it's important to embrace that because I think it's coming up because you need to do it, right? And so, I think all those things happen to be true. And I think you just need to trust that intuition again of like, I'm being called to this for a reason.
So stepping in to you as a beautiful woman and then doing something creative. I mean, that's essentially it. And you know what? The feminine is so important because even like when I had kids, right, and they're young, I felt like I wore sweats all the time. My hair was in a freaking knot on top of my head and there was no makeup and I felt like I was getting older and there was nothing going on. And the one thing that modeling did do for me was it allowed me to get up on stage in a beautiful gown with my makeup done and whatever. And as long as I wasn't comparing my 30-some-year-old body to the 18-year-old body walking on the runway next to me, I felt beautiful and powerful. So powerful, just standing up there in this beautiful outfit. And I think we do, especially even with the pandemic where everyone was working from home, people weren't going anywhere, we weren't going out. I mean, obviously I'm in Arizona, you're in Texas, we were going out, but I mean like in general, life changed, right, for everyone, no matter what side of the fence you were on. It changed with going out and dressing up, and a lot of stuff became at home, and now more people are working at home than in offices. But we have lost, like, I think it's Joe Dispenza that even says it, or maybe I don't remember who it was, but it's like, you have to dress the part. You got to show up. So if you want to feel beautiful and you want to feel powerful, you need to dress in a way that makes you feel beautiful and powerful. And I do think embracing that femininity is so important and often overlooked. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I think especially because our sexuality changes a lot during this time period. I mean, we have body changes, we have hormone changes that affect our, female organs and how everything works. And so it's also one of the biggest age groups to divorce. I think it's for a lot of reasons. I think they have spent all this time raising kids. They forgot to remember how to have a relationship. I think sexual, hormone changes on both sides that makes intimacy and things like that different. So instead of talking about it and leaning into it, it's just sort of, no one talks about it. No one says anything. Then all of a sudden there's no intimacy at all. And it's like, well, what happened? I don't know. And then I think there's also this desire of I need to be and look and do what I was like at 20 instead of embracing who I am now. It's crazy to me. I wear a bikini now. I am way more girly now than I ever was. I was already upset about my body in my 20s and I didn't wear a bikini after about 25. You know what I mean? And now I'm like, you don't like it? Don't look. I don't care. I do not care what you
Bring
think.
on the bikini.
Yeah,
Bring
you
it
know what I
on.
mean? But you have to kind of go through that storm. And one of the things that I did, and it's probably one of those things I should probably delete off my phone, is I would dress very girly, right? And things, and I would take a ton of pictures while I'm at home by myself with a camera. And part of the goal was to not pick apart every picture because, of course, you look and you're like, oh, there's a fat roll, oh, there's a scar, oh, there's a saggy skin. It was to find the one or two that I thought I looked good in, and then I delete all the other ones. And then what I would do is I'd actually send those to my husband. Nothing showing, like no porn, right? But it was me embracing my femininity 100% for me, and then appreciating one or two of those pictures and sending it to him so he could appreciate it. And for me, that was actually very, very, it helped me grow back into that femininity because I had spent so much time turning it off and hating my body because it wasn't what I wanted it to be. It never was.
Oh my gosh,
when I was in elementary school.
When I was 16, I hated my body. When I was 13, I hated, I seem to have forgotten that. It's kind of like childbirth. You forget that you delivered a baby. I forget how much I picked on myself for every little imperfection at that age. Yeah, it's crazy. I think, first of all, I can't believe it's been so much time because I literally could keep talking to you all day. But it's been our time, and I have to let you go help people today. But I think I love where we ended this because my goal of this show is to empower not just women, okay, guys out there, men go through a lot of struggles as well. And I hope to have even more men on this show as well to talk about what they're going through because I can't possibly understand. I'm a woman, right? So maybe if you're a man listening to this, this is giving you insight to what your wife might be going through or your friend or your sister or whatever, and vice versa. But I think as a woman going into my phase and looking at the changes that you're talking about and looking at them with optimism is such a powerful thing. And I have no doubt that somebody out there was listening today and said, you know what, rock on, man. I'm turning 50. I'm going to do this. And that's what I want you to walk away with today is that you are completely in control of your own happiness. Finding those things you love about yourself. We always have self-doubt. We always want what we can't have, and you will continue to do that. And someday you'll wish you were you right now, right now. Yep. So embrace it. Any other final words from you, my dear friend Betty, before we sign off?
It's
and how can they find you? Tell them how they can find you, because I absolutely want them to follow you. You have an amazing podcast and a new show. And I mean, you're freaking incredible. And you have such a wealth of information on so many different levels. So where can they find you, and any final thoughts?
Yeah, so you can definitely find me online at bettymurray.com. I have a podcast called Menopause Mastery that comes out every week. I also have a TV show called Powering Women Through Menopause that is going to be showing in the Texas area, hopefully to expand into other cities eventually. And if you're looking for hormones and bioidentical, you can find my company at gethormonesnow.com. My parting gift is this is not a dress rehearsal. Like, nobody ends up on their last days hoping they worked more, hoping they made more money. It's not that. So we got to stop living our life like there's another chapter that we're going to get to, and there's like some free space there. And that also means spending some time, energy, and effort actually having joy right now. It's not something you put off. Like you hear people say, oh, I'm going to do this in retirement. And how many people get there and something comes up, and it's not that. It's like you have to pick joy today, and you have to pick the investment to do it today, even if it feels like you shouldn't, right? Because that's how you get where you change careers and everything else. You take the investment and do it anyway. And I think people have to do that by selecting joy at the same time.
Well, I am in full joy right now. Just sharing a conversation and energy with your beautiful soul. So I am so grateful that you took time out of your day to be here, and the joy is obvious. And I thank you so much, so much. And I'm going to see you soon. So it's not goodbye. See you later. But thank you again so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.